I hate being the bearer of bad news, but I actually get off on it. The low speed compression knob sticks way out, so here's a long list of all the bikes this shock is not compatible with. So the compatibility issues don't end there. You need to measure the little yoke thing on the back of your Specialized bike and then compare it up to the stroke chart right here. So they haven't updated this for the Vivid, this chart is for the Super Deluxe. So let me give you a piece of good news when you're riding a Coil shock. Here is my friend's Specialized Levo, and he snapped the Vivid Air in half. So not even air shocks are safe from Specialized yoke bikes. So you have to understand this is an extreme use case. He pounded on this for 2 years. So that's why I would not ride any Coil shock on a Specialized bike for a long duration of time. They're basically going to fatigue and break. Here is the factory serial number from the shock I'm going to be riding. The first thing you should know is the Rockshox off-the-shelf tunes are absolutely trash. I've had this Vivid Ultimate on 3 separate bikes, and the experience is exactly the same. So if you want the best experience, go over to Jensen and you buy this shock, and then you gotta go find a tuner to re-shim it. The Vivid Ultimate on its 3rd bike, the Super Progressive Rocky Mountain, this should be a really good experience. But it wasn't. So here's how it started out. First thing you wanna do is not follow these steps. We're gonna take the serial number right there. You're gonna punch it into the Trailhead app, and basically it'll spit you out some recommended setup numbers. Make sure you click e-bike if you have an e-bike. So it's telling me to ride a 500-pound spring and negative 7 clicks of rebound. So if you want the best performance, watch the rest of this video. I weighed 220 pounds and I put that number into the Trailhead app. So it spit out a 500-pound spring, which is very, very light. So an easy hack here is to open up the service manual and look up the internal floating piston gas charge. So inside of the Vivid, we have a 200 PSI gas charge, which is on the very high side of bicycle things. So you are going to be on a lighter spring than you're used to. There is certain exceptions to this rule, like a push 11.6, I can use a 500-pound spring. But remember, we're dealing with Rockshox here, a very primitive damper. I wanted to run a little experiment for the setup video, so basically I put a 500-pound spring on the bike, and then I went out and rode it for about a week. So basically I got about the same performance as a Fox DHX. It's a little bit sluggish in the responsive department, but the Vivid is better because of the hydraulic bottom mount. The goal is for me to basically change my allegiance from Fox to Rockshox, and I'm going to do my best at the test track to set up this Vivid Ultimate to make it basically replace my Fox products. After that mediocre week, it's time to put some effort into this guy. So the last time I rode the Vivid Ultimate, I was on a 570-pound spring. And I'm currently on a 500-pound spring, so that may be the whole problem. I'm not sprung correctly. So when you want to remove the spring from your Vivid Ultimate, you gotta make sure the rebound adjuster is not in the fully fast setting because it will collide into the spring. So wind her into the fully turtle setting and it'll slide right out. Before installing the new spring, I had tried a whole bunch of different springs to see what would fit on the Rockshox damper. So unfortunately, the upper collar on the Vivid Ultimate does not allow you to run any of the narrower springs. So this is a Cane Creek spring, does not fit. This is an MRP spring, it does not fit. And Fox springs, they don't fit on anything anyway. So unfortunately, the MRP progressive spring does not fit on the Vivid Ultimate. So this is a huge bummer because there's no progressive spring you can ride on the Vivid Ultimate. So I would 100% ride a progressive spring on my Vivid Ultimate if I was on a Specialized bike, regardless of the hydraulic bottom mount. Rockshox in all their infinite wisdom do not think things through. 100% my personal take, but I would not ride the Vivid Coil on any linear frame because of the lack of progressive spring. So moving on to my progressive bike, I did a rough calculation of the last spring I rode in the super high internal floating piston gas charge, and then I settled in on a 550-pound Rockshox spring. So it's a super cheap spring, but if you are in a Coil curious adventure, it's going to pay dividends for you to get a spring dex because you're going to be able to dial in that spring rate to 30% sag. Let's say you're adding your Vivid Ultimate into a new bike. So if you want to avoid the vise and a whole bunch of specialty tools and hammering, I do recommend you trying to fit Fox hardware into your Vivid Ultimate. So the eyelets inside of the shock are completely universal. Sometimes you have to use the Rockshox hardware, but the Fox one is just easier. The top collar on the Vivid Ultimate, basically this will hold the spring in place. Ideally, you just want this thing snug, but if you don't have the right spring, you can crank that down. Now it's not the best, but it will save your ride. After the spring is securely in place, you're going to open up the hydraulic bottom out, the low speed compression, and the high speed compression to the fully open negative setting on this shock for setting the sag. But now it's ready to go in the bike. But do this first because basically it can be a little bit tricky when it's on the bike. Ideally, put the rebound to the full fast setting, but I already put it into the middle. My shock mounting hardware is going into aluminum, so I'm not super concerned about the torque setting, but if you are torquing into like a carbon bike, I would definitely be using a torque wrench. So I do have a secret tip here that I've recently learned. So check it out. Once we get everything nice and tight, you're going to take it off the bike stand. You're going to just like hammer on the bike on the ground and put it back up in the bike stand, and you watch how loose these bolts work. This preloads the bolts, and then you can basically get them tight to make sure they don't come loose on your ride. So loose hardware is an absolute nightmare. It can really wreak havoc. Once those bolts are completely tight, push the bump stop up and don't use a sharp pick and scratch the stanchion. After jumping up on the bike, making sure all the compression adjusters are in the fully open setting, I nailed it with the 550-pound spring. So I'm really curious if it's going to be better, worse, or basically the same. But I am so curious. Why? It's recommending me a 500-pound spring. So I open up TF Tune, which is the most reliable spring calculator I found on the internet, and once again, it's giving me a 500-pound spring recommendation. But more later in this video. Before setting out on any type of riding, take that rebound adjuster and move it around and make sure you're in the position you wanted. Many times I've set out and had it in the wrong setting. So keep the compression off, because the goal of the first little ride is to feel this shock out. The compression can completely jade the feel of the shock. With no compression added, you know what's going on. I have the rebound in the middle setting. It's a great starting point for any rider at any weight. So it's a little bit faster than the recommended setting, so I'm dumbing my riding down just to feel this shock out. If you do any kind of jumping, you want to set the bottom out control first. So our clickers are going to be pointed towards a slower rebound or more control. So with the rebound in the middle setting, I'm basically done setting this shock up. I could completely ride it. So if you don't understand compression, just use the hydraulic bottom out and leave the compression alone. But by the end of this video, you should be confident enough to use the compression levers. Starting out for the easy setup tune, basically on a hard landing, you need to feel the rear suspension. So mine is clapping out pretty hard, and this is a progressive bike at 37% in the rear end. The hydraulic bottom out is a very personal preference. I'm just going to put this into the middle to keep things simple. So keep in mind there's 5 clicks, so every click is very powerful. With the middle hydraulic bottom out, I set through the same jump line. It's very important to ride the same track. So the bike is much more better feeling on hard landings, and we can see the spring isn't collapsing quite as much as before. The difference between a poorly set up Rockshox product and a perfectly set up Rockshox product is very small, so it's arguable if turning the compression on is even worth it. A revalve, a retune, a reshim would give you much better results. After 2 solid years of struggling on the modern Rockshox products, I figured this out. So number 1 rule of the compression on the Rockshox product is always adjust them together and think about them like percent. So there's 5 clicks, so you're adding 20%. So I'm going to move them both into the middle. Unfortunately, I got the same results as the Vivid Air and the Super Deluxe. The high speed compression, the low speed compression just makes the bike ride awful. So you have to remember, you're adding 20%. That's a huge jump. When you make 1 click on a Fox product, that's like less than 10%. Not only does the compression ruin the ride, it also chokes the shock up. So even on a cross-country trail, it feels like the shock won't even move. So this is the same results I've gotten from every single Rockshox product I've rode before, Super Deluxe and the Vivid Air. So I did a little brainstorming, and we have 2 options here. I usually just turn the compression off and go back to that initial setting. But this time I was like, I'm going to move the rebound 5 clicks in the faster direction and see if it unchokes the shock up. Remember, I'm riding this same section of trail whenever I'm making those adjustments, and the shock was truly impressive by moving the rebound 5 clicks faster. The reason I moved it 5 clicks is because we have to think about all the adjustments like percents. So because I added 50% compression, I added 5 clicks of rebound, bringing the rebound to 75% from fully slow, or 15 clicks from the turtle. Before I started playing with the compressions, I did move the hydraulic bottom out to the fully minus setting. That's because it can affect the high speed compression, but the hydraulic bottom out is actually the best adjustment on this entire shock. So after being so satisfied, I knew I could get a little bit extra performance, and sometimes when you're setting suspension up, you just gotta use your gut feeling. Because I have middle compression, I'm gonna go to middle hydraulic bottom out and run through that section. The bottom out support provided by the hydraulic bottom out with the compression and stupid fast rebound was truly impressive. So just remember, anytime you adjust those compression adjusters on any modern Rockshox product, add a couple clicks of rebound in the faster direction to get rid of that choked up feeling. When it comes down to the spring calculators from Rockshox, I did figure out this mystery as well. So you're gonna go into the rear wheel travel portion of this and change it to 180 millimeters because it's gonna give you the right spring if you do this. But remember, 30% sag whatever spring it takes with the compression off. Next week, I'm going to take this out into the chunky stuff and see if that setup works with the ZEP 3.1. So that video will be on your screen depending on how soon you watch this video.